I noticed that when we go, like as people with a cultural different background, when we go through depression or anxiety, or when we have ADHD or autism or whatever it is you have, it's always, before you're diagnosed, it's always seen as a symptom of you having a cultural background, a different background, you know? It's just, that's who you are, and it's not taken seriously enough to actually send you to a psychologist and get you diagnosed, you know?
What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Familiar by Fem. Familiar is the audio and video outlet by Fem, which you are able to find on platforms such as YouTube, Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, and way more. In these episodes, we are unraveling topics such as diversity, inclusivity, and student life. In this episode, we are going to talk about a topic that may be a little more serious. Today's topic is diversity in mental health. The reason why we wanted to talk about this is because at our Student Association FEM, we are focusing a lot on diversity and inclusion. One not so much touched upon topic is the disproportionate behavior of people of color and people with a migrational background when it comes to mental health. There are plenty of factors that contribute to bad mental health, but in this episode, we would like to talk about what it can mean to have mental health problems or invisible disabilities as a person of color. Before we begin, I would like to disclaim that these are our experiences and that we are not mental health professionals, at least certified. As we are starting this episode, I have with me today three people who are going to talk a bit about themselves in a moment. So I would like you all to introduce yourself, starting with Zeineb.
Sure. Hi, my name is Zeineb Al-Hakim. I am 23 years old. I'm studying Law and Society, my final year bachelor at the VU. And I was born and raised in Utrecht, the Netherlands, but my parents were refugees in the 90s from Iraq.
Thank you. Maryam, could I ask you to introduce yourself as well?
Yes. Well, my name is Maryam. I am 24 years old and I study pedagogical sciences. I've done a minor in psychology and I'm going to start my master's in developmental psychology. So I am usually doing all things with kids. And I was born and raised in a small village on the Veluwe in the Netherlands. My dad is Egyptian and my mom is Dutch. And that's about me.
Thank you. Bruno, could I ask you if you could introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. My name is Bruno. I'm 20 years old and I'm a second year psychology student, so just finishing my second year. To my background, I am German, so I lived my whole life in Germany before I moved here 2 years ago. And yeah, my parents don't have a migrational background, so yeah.
All right, thank you very much. I'll tell you who I am for a second. I'm Varisha. I am 23 years old and I am a first year's anthropology student at the VU. And my background, I was born in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and my parents are both from Suriname, and I have an ancestral background from South Asia. So that's about me. And we're all sitting here because we all have something to do with today's topic, which is diversity in mental health. And we would like to talk about stigma within households of people of color, and what it is like when you have mental health problems or depression or anything else. And therefore, I would like to ask Zeineb, how is this for you at home?
Well, growing up, I often heard about the taboo regarding mental health, regarding depression, within mixed background households. But I actually never thought it would, I never thought I would have to go through that. My dad is a doctor himself, so he understands the concept of psychology, of mental health. He also went through a lot of stuff in his life, which affected his own mental health. And my mom and I have always had a great relationship, tell each other everything, you know. So I never thought I would have difficulties regarding mental health. However, what I did notice, I think a year and a half ago, during COVID, during lockdown, I actually went through a very heavy depression myself. I noticed that I felt numb. I didn't feel like going out anymore. I stopped contacting my friends. I was cooped up inside all day. I had no lust for life, which I usually do have. So it was pretty evident that something was wrong, you know? I've always had the idea that I had to do everything myself. But this time I was like, maybe I should talk to my parents about this, because it was the first time that I felt depressed like that. So when I told them about the fact that I felt depressed, that I was depressed, their responses were actually not as I thought they would be. I got remarks such as, "Oh, but you're young. What have you been through to feel depressed? You know, and you'll get over it. Just go outside and be with your friends, and you'll feel way better." And it was actually kind of pushed aside, and that was really surprising to me because, like I said, I didn't think I would hear such things. I'd think that I'd feel understood and they'd actually help me seek a psychologist or help. And my mom did suggest, why don't you talk to a psychologist then? But it was said in such a way as if my problem wasn't serious. And I guess coming from them, because they were refugees, they've been through a lot, you know, but that doesn't invalidate my own feelings and experiences. So maybe it comes from that place. Like they've been through so much that they see my problems as insignificant. I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk to a psychologist because I was pretty, like I said, I grew up with the idea that I had to do a lot myself. So it's like, you know what, I sort of know what the causes of my depression, so maybe I'll just try to deal with it myself. And I got really, really lucky that I had a friend, a really close friend of mine who went through the same thing. And we talked a lot. And that talking helped me through that difficult period of time. And that's why I actually chose not to seek a psychologist for my depression. I guess that's how things went. And luckily I got out of it. I sometimes still go through those periods of time where I just have the same feeling again, where I feel depressed, and I'm still a bit reluctant to seek psychological help in general. I'm trying to work through that. I feel like everyone should see a psychologist at some point. You know, it's just healthy. So maybe I'll do that. Yeah.
Do you think that the thing keeping you from going is more on the side of your parents? Or is there something else weighing into that decision?
Like I said, I feel like I've always had the need to do things myself. And maybe that comes from my parents. Maybe as a second generation immigrants, you're the one who everyone goes to in the household, you know, so you have to kind of, you have very diverse role within your place. And maybe that's why I often also, I don't know, prioritize other people's needs before my own. But like I mentioned before, I think if my parents had taken my problem more seriously and they've motivated me to seek psychological help, then I probably would have.
Do you think that talking about this could maybe help see parents things differently? Or do you think it's really in there, that they won't really change their mindset towards the topic?
No, I feel like if they heard how we feel, and how, you know, how there's a taboo, if they see that there actually is a taboo regarding mental health, and I think that would change their minds, because I saw that change with my dad. Even though he was a bit reluctant in the beginning, when I mentioned it later on again, he was actually more understanding. But obviously, sometimes it's difficult to talk to your parents because sometimes they can be the source of your depression, you know? So it's more difficult to talk to your parents about such things.
I recognize a lot of Zeineb's points because in the sense that I also feel like I've had to do a lot of these, or I had to navigate myself through this alone, because my dad is not Dutch and he doesn't really know how the system works here, and he has his own problems as well, and he's had a difficult life as well. And then I felt like I had to explain to him like how mental health works, I guess. Exactly. I don't really feel like there was a big taboo, or that I couldn't really talk about it because he wouldn't accept my mental health issues. But I think that it didn't even go there. Like I wouldn't even consider talking to him about it, because I just thought like, yeah, well, he doesn't understand it in the same way, I guess. Yeah.
But you did like seek professional help at a certain point, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
How did that go?
I did that myself. So when I first went to a psychologist, I was very young. I was 14 years old, and I got sent there through my school, and I really didn't want my parents to be included in that. And then later on, I went through therapy a couple more times also on my own account. Like yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Because it takes us to another thing, and that is another thing that's very common within people of color and women as well, is that diagnoses for problems are delayed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And you've told me that you do have like how do you call it? Like I call what I have a disability, but
Mm-hmm.
how do you because you have ADHD, how do you call it?
I'm just calling it ADHD. Yeah, it is a disorder. But yeah, I got diagnosed last November, and I'm 24, so I was 23 at the time, and that's quite late. Yeah, and I think that also is because my parents were not really able to be very mindful of how I was doing as a child, and recognize my mental health issues because of their own problems, and also because my dad didn't really, understand the Dutch system. So yeah, I got diagnosed late, as a lot of women do. I think that's because women often, or I as a woman, compensated for my ADHD when I was younger, and that didn't really look like the way we usually consider a person with ADHD to look like. Like usually you think of a boy that's very loud and runs around a lot, and I'm a girl and I'm not really loud, and I fidget a lot, but that's not as visible as another person might show off their ADHD. So it was never really shown until I realized that I have a lot of problems organizing my daily life, and that that's why my psychologist had a lot of questions. I was like, I think you have ADHD.
When did they like tell you like that they thought like this, that they were like maybe it's something else, maybe it's not just depression, maybe it's not like, maybe it's not your, because what did they assume at first? What was their explanation for your mental health problems?
I first went into therapy because of these depressive symptoms, but also anxiety. And anxiety and depression often co-occurs with ADHD, or so that's my personal experience. And my psychologist told me that maybe there is like an umbrella syndrome that like covers both of these symptoms, as well as the fact that I am a very bad planner, and I had a lot of my anxiety came from the fact that I was really bad with organizing my life, and just very forgetful, and just constantly anxious of doing or having to do all these things, and like not being good at managing it. So that's how she recognized it. And I was a bit like, I'm not sure if I have ADHD, also because I have that like mental image in my mind of what a person with ADHD should look like. But then I got tested, and I happen to have the combined type. So you have like the hyperactivity and inattentive type. Yeah, and I have the combined type. So I'm both like a bit daydreamy and also fidgeting a lot, like I'm doing right now. And yeah.
Like stimming. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know from the neurotypical world, there's like a lot of terms people often don't know, but like the fidgeting around, like it's ways to cope, right? Like so you are able to actually focus,
Yeah.
or just coexist in society like that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So how do you feel now that you've gotten your diagnosis?
It I now know why I have trouble with a lot of things. I know why I have trouble organizing my agenda and why I often make mistakes. I'm doing that in quotations because that's something that ADHDers get to live with a lot, is like overseeing details and then making a lot of mistakes. And I can now navigate through that better because I know that it's not my fault, but it's because I have ADHD. Also, honestly, I just have to navigate through it a bit more. I think I got my diagnosis so recently that I still have to think of myself as a person with ADHD and what it means to me. I don't know all the answers yet, but something that really helps is actually medication for me. Yeah.
So yeah, for you, it's fortunate for you that that is helping, but I'm also hearing like you kind of still have an imposter syndrome. Like,
Yeah,
is that
definitely
true? Like,
Mm.
you feel like there is no like representation of women, especially, but then you also have like women of color with disabilities. Like, there's no, you have no idea what it looks like. Like,
No, exactly.
we just know the stereotypical
Yeah.
examples,
Mm-hmm.
which aren't really relevant for boys all of the time as well.
No,
So
exactly.
it's so hard to navigate, like, am I this or am I that?
Yes,
Or,
exactly.
but at the same time, there's questions of need because you have like a disorder. Like, do you feel like those get answered now that you've gotten your diagnosis?
Not really, to be honest, because I was in therapy for it for a few months, and that helped me get some type of tools to, like I said, navigate my agenda, for example. But I still don't know what another person with ADHD would look like, or who I can talk to, or don't really have these role models to compare myself to. So I still often feel like an imposter. Yes, there should be more. It should be represented better, I think. That's what it's like for me, but I'm wondering what it's like for you. Like, what does masking look like for you?
Like, it's really on a social aspect for me because it's like, especially when I'm stressed, I'm trying to have like control of everything. So I'm like trying to have things in order so that some things make sense, because it's so hard to sometimes make sense of the social world and to communicate with other people, and it just takes up more energy.
Maybe also because it's unpredictable. Like, people, you can like control what people will say, so you have to constantly anticipate. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Like that. Like, and if you like, for me, if I have my things organized and planned and everything is set out a certain way and it goes that way, then it's just fine. But if it goes another way, then I get like stressed, or
Yeah.
I have like, okay, this is different than I had anticipated. So that's what is bothering. But that's the autism thing. It's like like ADHD and autism, in my experience, are like two very separate entities, but at the same time they're also very similar.
Yeah, because we both have to mask, but I don't, or my personal experience is that I don't necessarily have to mask a lot in social situations. Sometimes maybe, but it's more so in very practical things. Whereas that's something that you might be better at because you're good at planning and such.
It's like an entirely different thing. But for example, also with Zeineb, if I may ask you, like with depression, like also if you have like with your parents, like you have to pretend to be a certain way for people not to notice that something's going on, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I wanted to ask you guys as well, but for me, for example, I noticed that when we go, like as people with a cultural different background, when we go through depression or anxiety, or when we have ADHD or autism or whatever it is you have, it's always, before you're diagnosed, it's always seen as a symptom of you having a cultural background, a different background, you know? It's just, that's who you are, and it's not taken seriously enough to actually send you to a psychologist and get you diagnosed, you know? I, for example, had severe anxiety in high school throughout the years. It also caused me to fail my final exams in my last year, and it was just generally a very anxious time for me. And I had it for a couple of years, and I mentioned it to my mentors and my teachers, you know, and they saw my grades kind of going up and down and deteriorating. But no one ever thought to send me to someone to check it out, you know. They just gave, like, I did the high school level of VWO, and what they thought was the solution is to send me to HAFO. You know, the advice that they gave me is, why don't you do HAFO? Because VWO seems a bit too much for you. It's never seen as something serious, you know, it's just attributed to your background, or sometimes even to your parents, you know. So I wanted to ask you guys, with like the masking and like imposter syndrome, which I always also really experienced, like, did you have that as well, that people kind of attributed your, the things you faced to your background? I don't know how that is for you guys.
Like, for example, I've experienced this as in that when I went to a psychologist, they sent me to to someone who wasn't a mental health professional, but someone with the same cultural background, to talk about problems. But the problem here was that I was talking with a man, and I'm a woman, and he was telling me that he had depression later in life, and I had my depression earlier in life. Instead of taking me seriously and taking my problem seriously and immediately saying like, oh, this might be autism, they just were like, the reason why you have mental health problems is because you have a different cultural background, and that's causing your mental health issues.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's also the reason, that's one of the reasons why I was so reluctant to go to a psychologist, because most often than not, you will be sent to a white psychologist who has little to no knowledge of what you go through as a person of color, you know? And I've had so many friends who just keep searching for a person of color psychologist because they feel more heard, more seen, more understood. And it's true, because white psychologists will never be able to comprehend, you know, what we go through. For me, for example, as a second generation immigrant, and yeah, I don't know, maybe that's also a reason for a lot of POC people not to seek mental health, or like seek a psychologist.
Like, then Bruno, I want to come to you because I do want to ask you, like, I don't know if you want to elaborate, but on what you've been through, like, how was this for you? Like, on the cases of seeking mental health helping. Sorry, yeah, you know what I mean. But exactly. How was that?
Yes, for me, my mental health problems are kind of very much in the past already. So when I was like around 14, 13, I had like two, I would say now, depressive episodes. I don't know for sure because I never actually looked for help. I never felt comfortable even talking to my parents about it, because my parents, even now, like that I study psychology for like almost 2 years, and they don't think, they're not really, I don't know, they don't really believe that like things like depression or PTSD and stuff exist. Yeah, they don't really accept it as a concept in that sense. They, you know, like, I don't know, like they, as Zeineb kind of talked about the reactions of her family, like, yeah, like you can just go through it, like stop being, you know, whiny, or, you know, those kind of comments. I just got better because of luck, I would say, and I had my friends.
Why do you think it was that you had difficulty to express it to your parents? Like, why do you feel like they are also reluctant to accept mental health issues as an actual concept?
And I think for them it's also very much because they weren't as lucky to experience that much education. They come from a background where that just wasn't that possible. So my parents, for example, never went to high school. So I think that's a huge part in general because, I mean, just for example, like in university, like so many programs nowadays, they all have like one psychology course. You know, like everyone has at least nowadays, if they have like an academic education, they have heard about the concept of psychology or of clinical psychology to some extent. They have some understanding, and you just don't have that when you have a vocational education where it's just never touched up upon. So I also have to just say, like, I don't think my parents are bad people. I just believe they never had that opportunity to like be educated about that. And then it's just like, you know, what made me feel like I couldn't talk to them. It's just that they always made comments, because I mean, like mental health, it always comes up, like depression and stuff. You know, it's of course like a still common topic in popular media. You know, like it's not like you watch a movie with them and it's about someone with a mental disorder. Like they're gonna make some comments that, or they used to make comments that made me feel uncomfortable. And then also I remember those comments when I had my own problems, where I felt like I don't think they would take me seriously.
You got into psychology. Like, what were your reasons for that?
Yeah, at some point also like have that altruistic like meaning of like being able to help people in the long run, and also just my friends, myself, you know, because that's also what I think a lot of psychology students have. Like they also, you know, want to learn some things about themselves, you know, because you do recognize some things in yourself at times.
What about you? You have that as well, but pedagogy?
Of course, there's a part of me that, because my childhood wasn't like as amazing, that I feel like I want that for other children. So I felt like, okay, yeah, child psychologists are very much important because they don't choose their mental health issues. Like, not that you choose them when you're older, but you know, children are just so like vulnerable. So I feel like it's so important that there's there's a lot more thought put into, you know, children's well-being, because, you know, sometimes the parents can't. So I think it's important that professionals can.
Is there anything else you would like to like elaborate on notice on like why you got into psychology?
Also, you know, you see a lot of like misused lingo in that sense. You know, people still say Asperger's even though it doesn't exist, and it's a very questionable term as well because of its history. But you know, like those kind of things, they always come up, and I really always try now to like educate my friends, my family, and just like people in general about these things, so they know it. Like, I'm not trying to be a smart ass, but I'm just, you know, like trying to give them the opportunity to like inform them about the relevance of those issues.
Can I ask you a question, maybe? Ever since you started studying psychology, have you noticed a difference in your parents' mindset regarding mental health and psychology in general, or?
Yeah, I don't really know. Like we had like last summer, we had like a really big fight about it because so then I already studied for like a year, so I don't think the progress has been that big because it was kind of still the same about them, like kind of like not wanting to accept that these issues exist. Forgot to mention that in my answer when you asked why do you think my parents are like that. I think it's actually really hard for some people to acknowledge that you know, for example, what you said with your parents, that because they went through something really bad, that they can't understand why you yourself also have problems if you haven't went through that. And it's just, I think, a huge problem that people have is that they don't understand that people have different vulnerabilities and are differentially affected by the same things. Like, you know, if a traumatic event happens, not everyone's going to develop PTSD,
Exactly.
you know, for example, but some will, and it's not on them. It's not because they're weak or whatever. It's literally, you know, caused by factors they can't control.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of what's really abstract for some people to grasp, especially my parents. And it's also so much easier if you think about it to say like, oh, just like man up or like stop whining about it than saying, okay, we're not going to do this. We're going to, you know, because if you think about it, like mental health care is still pretty fucked up. Like I think here in the Netherlands and in Germany as well, you know, like having all that planning that goes into that to like make it really good is actually quite hard. So it's quite easier to say, you know, stop whining about it. Like, So that's, I think, where they're still like that, and it's really hard to get them out of there even now. But I do realize that sometimes I can tell them things, and it kind of changes something, like, because it approaches the topic from angles they haven't thought about, because they have also this like stigmatized view of certain disorders. And then if I tell them about like a fact or like an important aspect of that from a different perspective, they start to like, it broadens their stigma a little bit, like maybe not to the best, like also like there's still stigma there, but at least, yeah, I think it kind of changes something. But I honestly don't have hopes that I'll really change them. They're too old for that.
Yeah.
I understand that. I also think it's very confrontational, because with psychology, like, you have to look at yourself, and if you have certain views that maybe once you look at yourself realize, that maybe that's not a great view, then that kind of hurts. So yeah,
definitely. I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but I feel like lately I've developed the idea, and that's from my own thought process and experience, but I've developed the idea that whenever I mention things like that, that it's not going well with me, or that I'm depressed, I feel like especially my mom sees that as a personal attack on her parents, parental abilities. And I feel like it makes her feel like a bad mom. And I've tried to explain quite recently that it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with her, but maybe that's also one of the reasons why they're so reluctant to accept the fact that you have a psychological, that you need psychological help, because it makes them feel like they're incompetent as parents. I don't know if that's the same for you, but I've developed a theory. Yeah.
I agree. I'm like, it's very hard still to like go to my parents if something's going on, and I know there's no one to blame, and it's like, it is what it is, and you're not going to change anyone, but you're just gonna have to find a way to be self-aware, to like help yourself, because no one else is gonna do it, and like talk about it, because you're not alone in it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So with that, I would like to ask you, like, do you guys have any last comments or questions, or like anything else you would like to add?
I just wanted to, I think your theory in that sense, Zeineb, is also like makes a lot of sense as well, because I know, for example, for autism, that like back in the day, I think it was like the 70s, especially in the US, it's what I've learned in our courses, that there was this idea that autism was a completely environmentally caused disorder. So, and there was this term like refrigerator mother, that people or kids with autism, they developed autism because their mothers were very cold. And it's like, that's why, that's what they thought back then. And they didn't take into account that, of course, genes also play a big role. Yeah. And they also didn't consider that autism, or in that sense, neurodiversity, occurs along a spectrum, that, if a mom is a bit less empathetic, maybe, it's not because they're cold or whatever, it's just because they maybe also have certain neurodiverse or autistic traits that make it difficult, or influence her caretaking behavior. Yeah. And like, I thought just that was interesting, and I think that's still a view that a lot of people have, that they don't, as I said, like, don't consider those influences on mental disorders that you can't control, like genes, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good point. Yeah. Well, last minute message for parents, if you're listening, it's not you. It's just circumstances.
It's only your genes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? Because we're like running a bit out of time, but
there's so much to talk about.
This topic, like, it really deserves more attention, and for now. But for the viewers, like, I really hope that with this we have shown you some perspectives on diversity in mental health, and most important of all, we hope that we have made it a little bit easier to talk about this topic. Like, still disclaimer, these are our experiences, and we are not certified professionals. I hope you guys liked this episode, because this was today's episode of Familiar by Fem. Make sure to give us a follow on our Instagram, which is fam.students. And don't forget to sign up to become a member via bfam.nl if you aren't a member already. And yeah, stick around for more episodes in the near future. And thank you very much for tuning in today. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Masalama.
Bye.
Auf Wiedersehen. Ciao.